Hey, you guys, it's Deep Dive Film School. Our hands went up at the exact same time. It's Deep Dive Film School. Adam and Adam, film friends, buddies, pals, amigos. We just wanted to give a quick warning that this show does include spoilers. Every single review that we do, we will be spoiling the film. So if you want to play along at home, please watch the movie ahead of time.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Deep Dive Film School. I'm Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Palcher. This week we're going to continue our Visionary Sci-Fi Festival with 2016's Arrival, directed by Denis Villeneuve.
I think.
He's the one who directed Sicario, Blade Runner 2049, Prisoners, Enemy, and the new Dune.
The new Dune, that's right. I can't wait to see that.
I bet you're excited about
I'm
that.
very excited.
He's perfect for that.
I totally agree.
If you liked Blade Runner, I guess.
Which I loved. Yeah,
Okay.
we definitely need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Now, if you are new to our show, we did do a movie review podcast for about 12 years. We decided to switch it up and start doing a YouTube series, in part to be able to get more feedback from those people who are watching at home.
Absolutely, and just kind of change up our format a little bit to what we were doing. But we did 300 episodes over 12 years, which probably in retrospect doesn't sound. How many?
It's not that impressive.
Like 10,
we were a little bit.
A year?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was still over a year. We've grown a lot. But if you enjoy the show, please like and subscribe. We will
All
not
our
just
social media is right there.
Yes, down at the bottom. We won't just be doing sci-fi movies. This is going to be part of a film festival. We'll be moving on to lots of different kinds of genres.
Genres, directors is usually kind of
Yes.
how we switch it out, but we're going to be silly sometimes. A lot of dick and fart jokes, a lot of booze.
Those do happen. All those things happen.
And all that stuff is good stuff. So definitely keep watching if you like what we're doing. But let's get into this week's movie. Some of the cast we have here. We have Amy Adams again. Last week we talked about it. Amy Adams.
Big fan.
She apparently likes sci-fi.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, apparently.
But Jeremy Renner here, Forrest Whitaker, and Michael Stuhlbarg.
Who's Michael Stuhlbarg?
He's the one in A Serious Man, and he's the one
That's
in this
what
movie.
He's from. He's the CIA guy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's why I said he's underrated.
I like him a lot.
Everything he does is amazing, but he's so almost a chameleon in a lot of his roles.
Yeah.
That I just feel he's extremely underrated.
I don't think I even recognized him. Well, I knew him from something, but I couldn't exactly figure out what it was. One thing I'll say is that we do start this movie with a montage that's very reminiscent of the first 5 minutes of Pixar's Up if it was directed by Terrence Malick. It's essentially rather than a husband and wife, it's like a mother and a daughter. But I mean, listen, if by the end of this montage at the beginning, you're not like, oh, this isn't Roland Emmerich's Independence Day. What alien invasion movie am I watching?
Are these nice aliens?
Yeah, you have no idea because all you're like is like, oh my God, a child died, right? It's pretty intense.
For sure, you get this family story kind of mixed in with her depression at the beginning of the movie.
Yes.
And it's kind of a typical. You've seen this before, right? Like, oh, this person has some horrible past, and they're trying to forget it, and they're kind of in a bad spot, and she's a linguist for the government.
Which, how much do they make? Because her lake house is nice, and she's single. It's like a one-person income of I don't know what they're paying those guys because
I don't know.
Apparently she helped out with some
comment below.
Yeah, apparently she figured out some Taliban tape that the government gave her, and they were able to go in and bomb the hell out of whoever. And so she's still kind of on their payroll, but she's also a teacher.
Sure. Are you friendsing this where everyone's like, oh, they could never afford that apartment in New York?
Yeah, a little bit. I totally did. I was like,
it's a movie.
Yeah, I was on House Finder. I'm like, there's no way. There's no way. It is a gorgeous place, though. But you're very, very correct in the sense of screenwriting 101. We know so much about her character
right away
before we've heard her say word one. Now, again, and I realize we might be pronouncing the guy's name wrong, but Villeneuve,
Denis Villeneuve,
the director, the French director of this film.
Yes, he's French.
Man, the balls on this guy, because 18 minutes in, we finally see the image of what the alien ship looks like.
I love that.
I love it, but man, that is gutsy, right? Because we're just seeing the reaction shots of everybody.
This whole movie is a slow burn. There's a slow reveal here. He wants you to feel every motion, every movement is important. So I think it's totally necessary. It may not be for everyone.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, but like I think it's totally necessary for this kind of movie and just what kind of a director he is. You know, he definitely has. He wants to take his time. He wants you to really appreciate the environment, right?
Yeah. Well, and there's definitely a Kubrick-esque vibe here. I mean, I think, you know, the ship, or the shell, as they refer to it as in this film, every time that we're getting a scene of this ship, and we're hearing this like music over it, and it is the obelisk, right? It's the obelisk from 2001.
Sure. But even in Close Encounters, we don't see the ship till the what the aliens look like until the end. So
that is
we at least got to see the aliens and the ship and all that stuff early. They gave that to us early. So it could have been way worse.
It could have been way worse. You heard it here first, folks. Arrival could have been way worse.
Well, that's not my review of the movie.
Can we put that as a lower third? Adam Palter. Arrival could have been way worse.
So yeah, this high-paid linguist for the military is trying to basically what happens. You know, we get her story first, and then, you know, she goes to teach a class, and everyone's like watching something on TV. She kind of walks by it, which I think is a great nuance.
Yes.
Of just like, just people, you know, you're just on your day, you're focusing or whatever, and you go and start teaching this class, and I'm like, you know, where the fuck is everyone?
Right.
And no one's there, and they're like on their phones saying, look at the TV, and 12 ships have landed over the world.
Yeah.
In various places, and everyone's kind of
massive.
freaking out.
They're like the size of a small town. They're gigantic.
They're very just huge ships, and they're kind of upright.
They're haunting.
And they're a beautiful, awesome job of the just artistic design here.
Well, just like how they're kind of stone, like anytime that they move or like with the little sections open, it's this sound of granite against granite, this like sliding rock sound. And I love that. It's such a different interpretation from any other ship that we've seen within popular culture. You know, even ships that seem very strange or very alien, but you know, you think of something like District 9, like they always seem like they're cobbled together of all these different pieces of like machinery, whereas this
advanced technology,
we don't see. There is no machinery in this entire thing, right? I mean, it's
sleek.
It's these sleek, weird stone angles and very long corridors, again, very Kubrick-esque. But I love this. I love that art design in that way, including the actual aliens themselves, which we'll get to later.
And these 12 ships land, and we see kind of the social outbreak of how people are reacting to this.
Which reminded me a lot of Contact.
No, I was about to say that.
There's a lot of
contact in here, especially you connect the Jodie Foster character in that movie with Amy Adams
Exactly.
in here. There's a lot of similarities, but I love Contact.
I know, it's a great movie. It's a win, that's totally good.
So this was kind of a fun twist on that, pretty much, I think.
Definitely.
But you know, a beautiful movie, but we see this kind of social freak out of what's happening. They're not threatening at all, right?
They're doing nothing, actually.
Yeah, it's very mute and subtle. Just like their actions, and they, you know, obviously the government, and there's a huge army presence all of a sudden with around every one of these, and each country is communicating with each other. We come to find out once she gets picked up to be able to kind of find out what these aliens are saying to them, because they are talking.
Right. Well, and from a really early stage here,
there's some abyss in here too.
Oh, definitely some abyss.
Yeah.
I think the interactions that she has with Forrest Whitaker is so interesting because it, from a very early stage, sets up what the game is actually going to be. And what the game is going to be is when she says, well, I need to go there and actually see them. And the response she gets back from him is like, no way, that's not happening. So we're going to go talk to this other guy that's on the West Coast, who's another linguist that you know. And she throws at him, ask him what the Sanskrit word for war means. And so he goes and does, and when he comes back, he says, well, he said that it means an argument. And she said, and he's like, what do you think it means? And she says, I think it means a desire for more cows, right? And that's why they go with her, because a single word as translated in any way, shape, or form, and this is what really becomes the crux of the movie, can take on so many different meanings, and that translation of intent, right? It's all about the translation of intent. And that's why people are freaking out all over the globe. That's why some people immediately see war. Other people think they're being saved, right? Like, it's all about the translation of intent, and what does that intent mean? And I think that as its heart of it, which, as we move on, we'll talk a little bit about Ted Chiang's short story, A Story of You, that this is based on. Actually, what the entire thing is based on is around the concept of translation.
I love that she requests too. She's like, I'm not going to translate something that's recorded. I want to interact with this thing.
Oh, and that interaction with the recorder is so creepy too. Yeah. Just those little popping sounds. She's like, how many are talking? And they're like, 2.
Yeah.
Like, what?
The way they pursue the aliens here, and how they get into the ship, is so... I know it's slow moving, and I feel like it's really necessary.
Yeah.
And
it's its own mechanic.
They kind of fall up.
It's its own mechanics that is so charming and strange to see.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
I love it though. Yeah. It's just beautiful.
The throwing of he throws the glow stick.
Yeah.
And it floats up and then lands sideways, and you're immediately like, what? Like you immediately get motion sickness from it.
Have you seen that? Remember the movie Sphere, based off of the Michael Crichton?
Yeah, I like that.
That's a good one. Sharon Stone, Dustin Hoffman,
Samuel L. Jackson. Keeps having the Nightmare About the Giant Squid.
Schreiber. Yeah, it's a good movie.
I like it.
This one, it had some elements of that I thought a little bit too.
Well,
it is a procedural, right?
Yeah,
they're really trying to figure out what they're saying.
Procedural.
And once we get in there with the aliens and start talking to them, they're done so cool, and they're really kind of 2D until she gets closer.
Yeah,
but they're really 2D, and they're very slow moving. They look like long hands. Really. They look like hands with long fingers.
Yeah,
and they put up these little tentacles, and they spray this black ink. And you think they're kind of putting up some kind of alphabet or symbol, and that's really what she's there for, trying to figure that out and what that means. And they get a whole library of vocabulary together, trying to figure this out. Again, very much like Contact, where they're following the noises and all this stuff. And she starts being able to talk to him. She's the rebel almost to a point, because she takes off her orange suit. Yeah. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But there's no reason really for them to have him. It's just kind of protection for them.
Well, and I love the sort of ordinariness of the military in that way. Sure. They're very much going about things in the way that they see fit, right down to having the canary in the coal mine, right? Where they have the bird in there.
Of course.
And
that's the call.
Scenes,
I love that. I meant to mention that.
Yeah, and in these scenes, we're not even getting a lot of score in these scenes. It's this very dry soundscape. We can hear their feet crunching along across the sort of rock, floor. I also love the director's choice in a lot of these early scenes as they're entering into that room. It's shot upside down, almost as a way of saying that the entire concept of ceiling and floor is only being put for the humans, and that it's totally arbitrary, right? And so, for all intent and purpose, they are standing at a complete right angle, but none of that matters, because the only reason why gravity exists in here or anything like that is only being put there to accommodate the humans that are inside the room, right?
How advanced are these guys? Yeah.
Well, and I would go to another point that the heptapods, these alien creatures, hepto meaning 7, pod meaning hand or feet, I think. You think about some of the studies they've done on squids and octopi, I guess is how you say octopuses? Octopi?
Octopussy?
No. That's a movie. That's a 007 movie.
Oh, okay.
I wonder if that's part of why the influence to make them look the way that they did was from a lot of that research, where they're like, these are unlike anything else on Earth, right? And they obviously exist within something that has very different gravity, right? Because of the way that they look and the way in which they move.
I think another thing is the way they sound, too, right? Like, sound design in this movie is huge.
Very like whales, right?
Yeah, definitely I can hear whale sounds. I'm sure that was a motivation. I don't know.
I would think so. so.
But like, but yeah, it's very foreign, and they start dreaming in their language a little bit once they start going through this movie. And pretty interesting to think about dreaming in another language.
It's called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Which is basically the idea that if you immerse yourself in a language, you start to think within that language, right? And this is actually like a research phenomenon of the way in which different languages affect the way that those people that speak that language natively think. Very weird things, like in English, you would say like, Pulcher broke that glass, right? But in German, you would say, the glass is broken, or you would say the glass broke. Yeah. But you wouldn't necessarily affect blame to it.
Yeah.
Like that was the example I saw. I don't speak German, so please, if I'm wrong on the exact specification of that, it may not have been German, maybe in a different language.
We're huge in Germany.
But I do think that this concept of that affects the way that you think about your surroundings is at its heart what the entire basis of this story really was, right? Because this idea of language and of translation and of this gift that the aliens are giving to people, it really is like a paradigm shift of the reality that you believe, right? The way in which you see time and space.
I really think it's interesting that I really love at the beginning that all the countries are talking to each other and communicating back and forth. I think that's a huge part of this movie.
Yes.
Because they're giving each other data and just any angle that they can find to talk to these things or interact with these things and what they're testing out and why they're testing out. And that eventually comes back to bite everyone in the ass a bit.
Well, because there's obviously a lack of trust even from the beginning, right?
Exactly.
Like even from the beginning there.
No one trusts this thing.
Well, and what is it?
It's the classic army reaction to something like this is to shoot it down.
Well, but
at least they're talking to it.
Well, and that's one of the ways in which we go, oh shit, great, this is how mankind finally gets killed by aliens when aliens make first contact, is by a bunch of young soldiers who are ODing on this movie's version of Alex Jones, right? And they're like, man, we need to do a show of force, right? And so they send in this bomb that does kill one of the aliens, Costello, right?
Abbott and Costello.
Yeah, Abbott and Costello. What is it? Costello is death process, is what the Abbott explains to her. But again, I think that going back to this idea of intent and language, and that's this like little game that's continually played.
Oh yeah, for
that
sure.
Louise explains to us through this whole movie. I'm thinking about.
I mean, she breaks it down very simply, right?
Well, in this amazing moment where she's at the chalkboard and she's explaining how the sentence.
Yeah.
What is your purpose here?
Yeah.
And she deconstructs it down to all of its elements of like, well, first we have to know what here means. Yeah. And your meaning a collective your. We don't want to know why Joe Alien is on Earth, right?
Yeah.
And it's like all these different pieces. It broke my brain. I don't know if you ever...
And it was very quick, like how she explained it, and you're like, oh my God, I never thought of that.
Did you ever read the book, The Professor and the Madman? So it's about a couple other things, but the heart of the book, and it's based on it is a true story, is about the very first Oxford English dictionary. And it kind of, when you're reading it, it kind of breaks your brain because it's like, this is the first dictionary anybody ever made. And this is way after books have been made, right? Like this is like, thousands of years after the language is written down and people own like books in their house. So the way that they had to make the dictionary is by contacting all these different lords around in Europe that have personal libraries and having them write down the description of a word every time that they find it and cross-cataloging it and then sending it into Oxford so they could put it into their dictionary. And you suddenly go, oh my God, the whole concept of what words mean is so arbitrary.
It is.
Right? It's like someone just made a rule and now so many hundreds of years later we go, that's what that word means. But in the beginning, it was that some guy was like, okay, I'm going to find every book that has the word hat in it and send that into Oxford, then that'll end up in the dictionary.
Sure.
And this broke my brain the same way, where all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, yeah, like what does here mean? And what does what mean, right? And like all of a sudden once you think about it that way, you're like, none of it, there's no rules for any of it, right?
Or the fact that you say fuck, but it's the inflection of your tongue that makes it a bad word.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And how bad of a word do you mean, right? Are you talking about doing that to another person? Or are you saying it because you dropped your glasses, right? Like, because each different one is going to have very different intent.
Yeah.
And the fact that this alien's language is this roundabout where and it really is. It's the stain. It's the ring stain of a coffee mug, right? That's what their language looks like.
Yeah.
And
weird
however far out these little
things.
dribbles on the coffee ring are, mean different things.
That's totally what it is. Though.
But they're palindromes, right? And we find this out also is that the entire thing is palindromic in that it means something backwards and forwards, and that's not just their language, but that's also how they understand the intent of everything that they're saying, which is again why when Abbott says that Costello is death process, it's not that he's dead, right? He's dead is a solid, finished verb.
But they don't have that.
So he's within the process.
Yeah.
But he wasn't yesterday before the bomb went off.
Yep.
And again, kind of breaks your brain in this brilliant kind of a way.
The fact that he saves them in a way.
Well, he saves them in a way by pushing them out. And it also makes you wonder, there's this concept of them saying, produce the weapon, right? And it makes you wonder, I've thought about this a lot watching it this time through. Later they go, oh, the weapon also is a word that means tool, that also means a word that means gift, and it is their language and all these other things. But it's also very possible that in that moment, Abbott was telling the soldiers, produce your weapon.
Offer a weapon.
Offer your bomb because we need to get to the next thing that's going to happen here, right? Costello needs to die. You guys need to get blown out of here, and she needs to come back up, but on our side of the screen. So there's the way that time folds back in on itself to propel characters to do the next action starts to happen so often, and what it makes you realize is that Louise is understanding the language enough that people in flash forwards that she's experiencing are coming in asking her to do things.
So she says this at the beginning of the movie and during the Terrence Malick part that you're talking about. And she says, memory is a strange thing bound by time and order. And I think that's like the theme of the whole movie. There, right?
She also, in that moment, she also says, sometimes the end isn't the end.
Yeah.
Right? Like sometimes the end of the story isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's the beginning.
Yeah.
But I completely agree. It's like the way in which these things are bound, and obviously Slaughterhouse-Five is the Trafalmadores of Slaughterhouse-Five are a huge influence here.
No doubt.
And actually what Ted Chiang, who wrote the short story, said is that his inspiration for the entire short story, why he wrote it, is actually from a foreword in the 25th anniversary edition of Slaughterhouse-Five, where Vonnegut said this, Stephen Hawking found it tantalizing that we could not remember the future, but remembering the future is child's play for me now. I know what will become of my helpless, trusting babies because they're grown-ups now. I know how my closest friends will end up because so many of them are retired or dead now. To Stephen Hawking and others younger than myself, I say, be patient. Your future will come to you and lie down at your feet like a dog who knows and likes you no matter what you are. Right? And that was what gave him the idea for the short story that became Arrival.
Interesting.
Was this idea, again, of the way in which time wraps back around itself.
Yeah.
Which, again, I think is so... And I thought a lot about Slaughterhouse-Five watching it the first time because I'm like, the heptapods...
From a film structure standpoint, though, like they don't really mess with time that much in this movie.
No, not really.
Like,
it's more just her concept of time.
Exactly.
Right? It's nobody else... And ours. Nobody else within this world is experiencing it the way that she is, with the small exception of what's his general, the Chinese general.
Yeah, Chiang.
General Chiang. He definitely, his character does some very interesting things at the end of this movie.
Absolutely.
But let's get into the big reveal. Let's get into this actual reveal of what Louise discovers.
Yeah, I mean, we keep seeing these flashbacks up to her past life, and mommy and daddy talk to animals, and all this stuff, and the drawings with her daughter that we know dies of cancer, but we know that she's gone through a divorce because they don't really tell us. But then she kind of reveals, kind of slowly, that it's because mommy could see the future and daddy didn't like what we had to say, what I had to say. And you realize kind of slowly, like, oh, she knew her daughter was going to die and he didn't like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, the reveal, I kind of wish we would hear what her dying words were, but the reveal with the Chinese general is essentially, you told me my wife's dying words, and no one else would know that except for you.
Yeah.
And made me stop everything. And basically, everyone goes offline at a point with the countries, right?
Yes.
And
we're going to war.
And everyone's
that's
ready.
They've
got the guns locked and loaded where they're ready to go. And so he was the first one to do it, but he was also the first one to start communicating again. And everyone kind of calmed down a little bit and came back together and moved forward. And she became famous because of this. And we kind of start realizing that what we've been seeing the whole time is not flashbacks, but actually flash forwards. It's her predicting the future.
It's that moment when she asks
it's that aha moment.
Abbott, she says, "I don't understand. Who's the girl?" And that was like the moment that broke my brain, where I was like, she's having these flashes.
Yeah.
And when you watch it the first time, you're very much feeling like she's got this really important job to do, and she's trying to cope with the death of her daughter, and she doesn't know how she's going to do it.
So why is she depressed at the beginning is my question.
She's just a mopey ass bitch, man. She's just mopey. Because I wanted that too, and she was like, when she's talking to her on her phone to her mom, and she's like, "Oh, you know how I am, just like always." I'm thinking, dude, your daughter hasn't even died yet. But maybe that's part of it, right? Maybe part of it is this concept of what she asks him, which is, if you could see everything and you had it to do over, even all the bad stuff, would you do it anyway, right? And it's like, that's almost what turns her around into a non-mopey person.
Yeah.
Is this realization of like, I want to experience that. I want to get married to this guy, and I want to have a kid with him, and I want to love that girl right up until the moment that she dies, right? And it's like that understanding all of a sudden of the way in which time is folding back in on itself, but it makes it so much more interesting when you go, this earlier scene where they talk about a zero-sum game. What's it called? When there's an agreement and it's a win-win. Well, something a little more scientific.
Yeah.
If you want science, ask your father. When that happens the very first time that you watch this movie, you're like, it's a little cutesy. It's a little cutesy that her flashback totally informs what they're talking about in the future.
Exactly.
And then you realize,
oh
my God, it's not that at all. It's a flash forward where her not born daughter yet is sparking something in her that is going to help her understand what she's supposed to do today.
Genius.
And it does that over and over again. And the way that I wrote down the thing that you eloquently described it, but this is how I wrote it down. We start to double back on memories and overlap to the point where future General Shen of the nuke happy Chinese military is pushing the plot forward with a pretty brilliant Deus Ex Machina that looks like it's pulled straight from a David Lynch party, where he coaxes Louise into calling him in the past to convince him not to wage war against the aliens by quoting his late wife's last dying words, which Louise does at gunpoint in Mandarin. Everybody got that? Good, because that's what happens. That's our climax for the movie. And it totally works.
I love the
But on paper, you're like, that's insane. You can't actually do that.
I mean, they did it.
Right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like you can. It seems way too convoluted.
It does. When you say it like that, it totally does.
Yeah.
I love that the flag, they have their flag in the background. I don't know if you noticed this along with all the countries' flags. There's a flag.
Yes. It is the center flag at the party that they go to.
Yeah, where Chiang and her talk for the first time.
Yeah, that everything worked. It all actually worked out. And when we very initially jump to that, we're like, whoa, wait. You can't do that. Like, we just had all this tension.
Yeah.
You just got rid of all the tension. Everything's going to be fine. And then you're like, oh my God, it is. He's pulling a total Lost Highway, and he's like, I'm in your house right now. Call me.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, basically. and it works, and it works. And she's at gunpoint saying this phrase that I also want to know what it is, whatever this, these
does it
dying
matter,
declarations. No, not really.
It doesn't.
It's just the genius that's what happens.
Yeah, it's not what she says, it's that she knows what she said.
Yeah.
Or his wife.
Basically, this idea of, look, what the this concept of like, look what the aliens gave me as a gift. If you learn the language.
She's the only one who's actually touched and connected with them, right?
Yeah.
That's why she can do this.
I love when she's on that other side of the wall too, and the effect on her hair. It's a very underwater kind of effect, and you can suddenly see the tops of them that are these terrifying sort of heads and shoulders. They're much more intimidating than when it was just this sort of hand octopus thing.
Yeah.
It's like, as far as the imagery goes, it's so palpable and so amazing. But even beyond that, the story itself, the way, again, that this past kind of informs itself in that way. Like, I think of, you think of whatever season of Lost it was, where you realize that some of the flashbacks are actually flash forwards, and you're like, oh my God! And it was like this amazing moment. And then they
season 3.
Yeah, season 3. And then they squandered it by basically not having a way to have that be impactful. And you look at a movie like this where it's like, that's how you do it. Where all of a sudden it's like, no, actually the ability to have a flash forward and understand those things, if you have a character that can do that, what they're going to start to understand about time and cause and effect, and even the concepts of life and death, are going to start to kind of unravel, right? And it's pretty brilliant. It's a pretty brilliant concept.
The ending to me made it a good movie. It turned it from a good movie to a great movie. Like, it was a really solid movie, pretty much the whole time, if you don't mind the pacing. And the acting, everything, every element is really well done, and it was always really good. But once you find out that twist at the end, it just kind of changes it.
Well, and the rewatchability goes up and up and up.
And so now you're looking at the very first scene and how much they're explaining what they're giving away so quickly.
Yeah, that you don't even notice.
You don't realize it. Yeah. But the way he makes you feel, he projects that onto you.
Yeah.
And makes you seem like, these are flashbacks. This is obviously why she's sad.
And it's funny, I made
really brilliant.
I made the Terrence Malick joke at the beginning there, and I really do think that this movie is a great, in thinking about a lot of Terrence Malick's like really out there stuff, where it's like, oh no, we got dinosaurs. Okay, so fine. Maybe the dinosaur can help Sean Penn. I don't know.
Tree of life is what you're referencing. Yes.
But you think about the more grandiose that Terrence Malick gets.
Oh, you hate that movie. That's so
it's
funny.
just because it's corny. It's like it doesn't make those pieces don't make sense together. Whereas this movie has just as much about the human condition and giant seven-legged aliens, and all of it dovetails together so tightly that you understand why each scene exists in the movie. And I think that's the way in which you do, what you said last episode, this idea of like, how do we talk about the human condition using extraordinary means, right? And that's the basis of science fiction. And I think here it's like, you just see it. You see it so clearly.
The final ending idea was that the whole reason they were there was so us as countries would work together to figure this out, right? Yeah. And that's their whole purpose of being there, and there was no threat at any time.
No, and in fact, that in 3,000, they basically tell Claire or Louise, they basically tell her like, hey, in 3,000 years, we're going to need your help. So we're coming here today to give you our language, so that you can evolve, so in 3,000 years you can come and help us. Right? That's what he says to her. And you're like, whoa, like that's kind of an insane concept. But again, all of it's really riveting, really interesting. And so just so much fun to look at.
Yeah, it's a beautiful movie. My only complaint really would be that it's a really damn dark movie. Like, I remember this even in the theater, walking out and asking my wife, like, was that dark? Like, it seems super dark. Like, even the light scenes are dark. Like, did you put a filter on your lens and just
very blue?
Took
it's
it
all
off?
very I can see that.
And then I watched it again, and I was still having a hard time watching. That was my only complaint. Is like, it looks beautiful, but like I wish I could see more.
You gotta take those sunglasses off, man.
Always wearing those, especially inside watching movies.
I feel like that we need to definitely have a disclaimer at the beginning of our episodes that we're gonna spoil. because we didn't do that this time. And
oh yeah, we're spoiling this movie, guys.
We'll put a. We'll
it was the aliens the whole time.
We'll put a bumper up at the bottom or something. Yeah. But yeah, that occurred to me when I was like, "Tell them the reveal, Paul. You tell them the big reveal, man." And then I was like, "Oh yeah."
All right. Well, there's another episode in the books. Next week, we're going to continue our Visionary Sci-Fi Fest with Ex Machina.
Yes.
And then we're going to end with Okja.
And if you guys agree, disagree, anything in the comments, we would love to hear what you guys think. Also, you can send us an email. We're going to have the link right down there.
Deep Dive Film School at
Deep Dive Film School. Film Skull. That's my other show. That's my metal band that's about the podcast. All the songs are about each episode.
Film Skull.
Deep Dive Film Skull. So it's a heavy metal band. It's pretty cool. Anyway, that's it for this week. Unless you have anything else.
I'm good.
Thank you so much. I'm Adam Sherlock.
I'm Adam Poultry.
We'll see you guys next week.